This is how I'm keeping my drive home. Well, make it to London alive, and keep Trevor alive too.
Made it to Oshawa alive.
Oshawa picked up a set of MMA gloves for tomorrow night. Last minute running around from PFC. So this is our little blog number 2 coming out. Little one had a little bit of vulgar language, and
I apologize. Rescind some of my statements.
thanks to the co-host Trevor Airdrie here. So Trevor, talking about the PFC itself, what does this do for like MMA here in Ontario? What does it give for the fighters and stuff?
Well, it's a fantastic stepping stone for a lot of the fighters that were going out to Alberta and Nova Scotia and Halifax and the United States. It gives them a nice little stomping grounds to actually fight in Ontario in front of their home crowd. It's going to do wonders for MMA Ontario and the growth of the sport. And can't say enough about Jamie Champion for putting this event on and, treating the fighters like royalty like he's been doing. Can't say enough about him. It's going to be a hell of a show tomorrow. And that's about it.
All right. I was talking when I did a radio show there with MMA diehards the other night, and we were talking about Chris Hordaski, about the hardships and stuff he's been through, losing his coach, and then going on a little bit of fights there where he wasn't coming out on the best of ends, and took a headbutt back in October in Sarnia, no decision. And he was talking about how it was, didn't have that blow of a crushing defeat or the high of a thing. Just talk a little bit what you think of Chris and what he does for the sport here in Ontario.
Well, Chris has always been one of the big prospects of MMA in Canada, and you got to remember the guy's still in his early 20s. He's had a lot of pro fights, and he's main evented a lot of cards. He's main evented out in Alberta in his last card. He's been a champion in certain organizations, and he's really being like a stepping stone for the guys at Team Tompkins. Like, he is one of the few chosen people left of Sean Tompkins' coaching career. He's a great athlete for Canada, and he brings a very exciting fight to the fight game. He's never gone out there and put on a boring fight. He always lives by the sword, dies by the sword, win or loses. He's a champion in the eyes of Ontario. And he's, coming from the tutelage of Mark Hominick and Sam Stout, and like I said, Sean Tompkins. And he's just a phenomenal spokesperson for MMA Ontario.
Cool. Now, there's already rumors of a second PFC show coming out. We won't talk about where and when, but we could talk about, possibly looking forward after this event, who could look forward to being maybe top fighters on that or co-main events. Like, talk about some of the local fighters that are close and in and about Kitchener, even, London and Hamilton.
Well, there's a few names that come to mind that aren't on this card. You have, Ryan Dixon. You have Kyle Post, who fought in Sarnia last year for the Score Fighting Series. You have Devin Murray, who used to fight for King of the Cage. You even have some of the guys like on the amateur ranks, like Aaron Rotunda, or, there's a lot of up-and-coming guys in Ontario, and this is like a great starting point for these guys, because you don't have the Score Fighting Series anymore. You do have, I believe it's SCC here in Toronto, but really, other than the UFC, there isn't really a whole bunch of places for Ontario boys to go and fight. And but yeah, you have Kyle Post, Devin Murray, Aaron Rotunda, you have Ryan Dixon, you have Simon Marini. There's a whole bunch of people, Elias Teodoro, even like a guy like Chad Laprise, who are on the cusp of making it to the next level, but need places to fight, and that's what makes PFC so perfect for these Ontario boys.
Perfect. Now, moving forward, with tomorrow's show, they're looking close to being a sold-out show. What could the fans look forward to tomorrow night?
Knockouts, submissions, exciting fights from Ontario fighters for an Ontario crowd, and it's going to be, I'm going to say there's probably going to be at least 3 fights tomorrow that could contend for fight of the night, at least 3 fights. Not to mention, you have 2 women fights on the card, which is fantastic. Love the sport of women's MMA just because they're always known to bring the fight. You look at the first UFC women's fight of Ronda Rousey versus Liz Carmouche, and then you had the Kat Zingano versus Miesha Tate. You have 4 female athletes in Ontario fighting tomorrow that could put on fights just like those fights were. Then you have guys like Chris Hordeski, who I would rank as one of the top 10 fighters in Canada. You have Malcolm Gordon, who's a young up-and-coming guy. You have Joel Paquette, who's fantastic. And all these guys are going to put on a show, especially in their hometown of London.
Now, what do you think? Now, what I'm excited about is the 2 women's fights. The 2 women, 4 women that are fighting tomorrow. How does this kind of open the floodgates, maybe, or open the door for a lot of other, Ontario girls to finally step out of that shadow and start getting into the fight game?
Well, like I did touch on this a little bit before. Women in MMA are fantastic. They fight hard, they fight hungry, and not only that, if you go to any MMA gym now, after the whole influx of women in the UFC, in Invicta, when Strikeforce used to have it, you go to any MMA gym right now, you will at least see 2 women in that, because of the door that Ronda Rousey and Miesha Tate and all these women, and even if you look a little bit further back of Cyborg Santos and certain people like that, you never saw that a while back. You never saw that big influx of women, and now MMA gyms can have so much more growth because of certain things like what the PFC are doing with 2 women's fights. That's relatively unheard of. You watch a UFC event with a women's fight, there's 1. And, if there is 2, chances are it's the starting fight of the night, and then you see one of the star-powered women. But there's so much of, great talent. Like, you watch The Ultimate Fighter this year, there's 4 women on The Ultimate Fighter this year that have better records than the women that were already in the UFC. That's something that you can really sink your teeth into. Like Shayna Baszler has beaten 2 of the top 10 women in the UFC right now, and has to work her way up by going on The Ultimate Fighter. That's crazy. And I expect both those women fights tomorrow to put on a great show for the fans, and it's something that you can really be excited for.
Well, now I did put you on the spot before, but about Shannon Ludlow. I know you look at her as a female fighter that's, she's one of those up-and-coming fighters, and we've seen her at the gym. And talk a little bit about Shannon, what she actually brings to the fight game.
Well, Shannon is a tremendous kickboxer, first and foremost. If you see her in the gym, she has one of the hardest work ethics I think I've ever seen. She can spar with the boys. She has no problem getting in there. And that's what's great about MMA is men and women are so respectful to each other, where they can intermix and, not be, oh, this is a guy fighting a girl. No, half the women that are fighting right now can kick any man's ass. Like, they're just that well-rounded and that technical. And that's like when you see Shannon at the gym, like at Adrenaline Training Center, or tomorrow when you see her fighting, she just has a work ethic that is almost unmatched to people that I've seen at any gym.
Cool. Now, when we're talking about Ontario, the fighters coming out of Ontario, touch a little bit about Jesse Ronson, who just made his debut in the UFC. And, I had a good chance to talk to him yesterday at the gym. And the guy's just all around a cool guy, man. He's good to be around. He's always making funny comments on Facebook and stuff. And just, all around good guy. And I really hope that he, I mentioned something. What would you think about a fight between him and Darren Cruikshank?
It's an interesting fight. 2 things come to mind when I think of Jesse Ronson. I think of the triple head kick for the Score Fighting Series when he fought the one Healy brother, I believe Ryan Healy. That triple head kick was insane. He dominated a 3-round fight. And I think of his UFC debut in Toronto in September here, when he slammed Palazares, sorry, I really struggle with Brazilian names. But when he slammed him, if that fight would have lasted 15 seconds longer, in 15 seconds that fight would have been over and Bronson would have had a TKO victory. Darren Cruikshank, I kind of like that fight. A name that's been popped out from other media outlets is actually John Makdessi right now, which the fight kind of doesn't make sense after, Makdessi with the impressive knockout at Toronto and Bronson coming off a loss. But that's a fight that would be very, very stand-up oriented, and it's a fight that Bronson could actually beat and put him right on the map in the UFC mind. He's already on the map in Canada, but to make a footstep in the UFC, he would have to beat one of those top-notch light heavyweight or lightweight, sorry. And at 155, there's a plethora in the UFC. There's a number of interesting opponents. But Darren Cruikshank, yeah, I could see him taking that fight and putting himself back in the win column, because I don't think Cruikshank could really stand and bang with Jesse Bronson.
Okay. Now another Ontario boy, another guy from London. He's got a fight coming up, Sam Stout. He's been through a lot lately, and what do you might take out of his upcoming fight?
Keep it standing. Cody McKenzie is very, very deadly on the ground. Keep it standing, keep it at a distance, and use your kicks. And you know what, in Sam's mind, it's never good to be on a losing streak, especially in the UFC. Dana White's mentioned time and time again. There are over 100 people over roster right now. Then you have Tough 18, you have Tough Canada versus Australia coming up. Those are guys that are going to get contracts too. So Sam has to win this fight. I see Sam winning this fight, but keep it standing against Cody McKenzie, because nobody wants to be caught in the quote-unquote McKenzie law.
Now, there's been no release or anything of the Ultimate Fighter Canada versus Brazil. Canada versus Australia. Who would you like to see Canada have on that show? Not, no rumors or anything. Who would you actually like to see? They're going to be bringing on 4 170-pounders and 4 185ers. Who can you name off to be a possibility of being on that show?
Well, for Team Canada, there's tons of guys right now that... Yeah, there's tons of guys for Canada that could be there for 170, 185. Guys like Chad Laprise comes to mind, out of the Adrenaline camp, 7-0 pro. Guys like Ryan Dixon, Elias Theodoro. There's a number of them. Devin Murray out of Kitchener, he's a 5-1 at pro. Those are guys that I would like to see on the show. But with Canada MMA growing as much as it is, you could list off so many guys that would be fantastic to represent Canada. But I would have to say a good friend of mine out of Adrenaline, Chad Laprise, is number one on my list of people from Canada that I want to see fight there.
Yeah, now you said a name there, Chad Laprise. This guy is like one of those, man, he's such a nice guy, and he puts on amazing fights, and he goes in there, bangs with the best of them, and puts on exciting fights. And give a little bit of your insight on Chad.
Well, Chad Laprise is one of those guys, you always use that term when you're thinking of just relatively good people, where they don't forget where they come from. Chad is one of those guys that will never forget where he comes from. He's a very proud Canadian. He's a very proud to be associated with religion and stuff like that, which is fantastic things. He'll never forget where he comes from, and he's a hell of a fighter. The guy's 7-0, and I can't stress how impressive that really is. Because any given night in the cage, you can win or lose, and Chad's happened to be on that winning end 7 times, and he's going to, if he does make the show, I don't know yet who's made the show. They haven't released a press release, but Chad is one of those guys that will represent Canada, will represent them proud, and would be probably one of the favorites to win the show, providing he can make it.
Excellent. Well, that's a little bit of what's going on in Ontario and MMA right now. So as we're off to last night before the PFC and things. You got any closing comments or anything about?
Well, once again, I'm going to close this one. Buy your tickets for PFC tomorrow. There's going to be 10 incredible fights, 2 women fights, 8 men fights, some of the top 10 athletes in Canada. You can get your tickets. There's very few left available, so get them tonight, get them tomorrow as soon as possible. You can get them at 1-888-SIMREN1, that's SIMREN1, or online at profc.ca.
All right, so that's our little blog on our way back from Oshawa, now off to Kitchener, then to London, then back to Kitchener, and then back to London for the fights. So an exciting couple days here. We'll see you guys all at the fights tomorrow. Good luck to everybody, and thank you to Trevor, and here we go.